I am Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman, and you are listening to the Conduit Street Podcast, where the rubber meets the road of county public policy. Your drivers are Kevin Canale and Michael Sanderson, and they will take you where you need to be.
Welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast, folks. This is your host, Michael Sanderson, and joining me for this episode is my colleague at MACO from the policy team, Karrington Anderson. Karrington, how you doing?
Good. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you. And we have great guests for today and a topic that I think is really timely and important, and glad we could corral our guest. Our guest for today is Gene Ransom. Gene Ransom is the Executive Director at MedChi, the Medical Association for Maryland, and we wanted to get into talking about healthcare sort of in the wake of federal legislation. The sort of big ticket reconciliation bill has a lot of consequences for healthcare and health delivery in Maryland and elsewhere. We thought this made a lot of sense. So Karen, do you want to lay a little more ground before we welcome Gene?
Right on. Medicaid is undergoing some serious scrutiny here in Washington with some cuts that will likely affect everything from maternal health and behavioral health to nursing homes and emergency room. And at the same time, Maryland stands apart from the rest of the country with a unique Medicaid structure. Today, we're talking with someone who knows both ends of that spectrum, state and federal health policy, as well as county governance. Gene, thanks for joining us. We're glad to have you on.
Really appreciate having the opportunity to be here with you guys today. It's great to see Michael again in Karrington. It's good to be with you.
Great. Why don't we start by grounding our listeners? Can you tell us about MedChi and what you do and who you represent?
So I represent the Maryland State Medical Society, which is MedChi, and the reason we have the funny name is because we've been around since 1799. We were originally the Medical and Chirological Faculty of Maryland back then. And frankly, if you wanted to be a physician in Maryland, you had to deal with us. Over time, we've kind of morphed and changed, and we're now the Professional Association for Physicians. And pretty much anything a physician needs in Maryland, we provide it for them. We have a series of subsidiaries that provide services. We have doctors who work for hospitals. We have doctors who work for academic centers. We have doctors who are in private practice running their own business. We have the whole gambit, and we try to fill those needs. Our mission is to be the foremost advocate for physicians, patients, and the public health of Maryland.
And so your footprint is across the state, which I would imagine would give you a pretty clear picture of the real-time challenges facing providers right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And I mean, this is similar to MACO, where you represent everybody in every jurisdiction. And obviously, when you're providing services to Garrett County, it's a little different than when you're helping out somebody in Prince George's, right? And I have a similar dynamic. The healthcare system is very different depending on where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah, that is definitely speaking our language, and no surprise. So you also, prior to your time with the Medical Society, had a career in public service and spent some time as a county commissioner in Queen Anne's County. I'm interested. You have any sort of haven't given a little time and reflection? Any things to think back on from your time as a county commissioner? Maybe things that have carried forward into your current professional work?
Well, first of all, I was a county commissioner from 2002 to 10 in Queen Anne's County. I'm the last Democrat there. And I really enjoyed it. I will say that the one thing that I would say is that MACO was a wonderful resource for me as a commissioner. And to be honest with you, the meetings you held in the winter and down in Ocean City, which I think is coming up pretty soon,
sure.
It's just great. I still go to the summer meeting, actually. I love it. You guys do a great job getting us to really understand complicated issues and work together, and it was terrific. It was a terrific organization, and I would encourage people who are interested in Maryland policy to be involved with you, and especially attend those two meetings. They're great for getting to know different officials. The thing that I personally learned, I think, is that when I was much younger, I'm actually the youngest person to be elected commissioner in Queen Anne's. When I was much younger and I was county commissioner, I was much more combative. And I think being in local government where you need to actually solve problems, that if the schools aren't funded, the police aren't on the street, things don't get done. You get a lot more done when you work with people and you try to work collaboratively. And I think the 8 years I served in office until I left actually to become the CEO of MedChi. I finished my term out and then took over kind of as I left. You really realize that you have to figure out how to work with people, and you have to work with people who have different views. And I think that's one thing, if you're successful in local government, you figure out while you're in there, or you don't get a lot done.
All right, so folks who are listening now, they understand exactly why we wanted to have you on the pod. You're the guy who has the big picture. You can come in and drop some kudos to Mako. That's a great read the room moment. I completely agree that it's a great opportunity for folks to understand policy and politics and so forth. But yeah, you play a road game, you kind of like play to the audience a little bit. So I love it. We're really glad to have you on board.
No, but it's actually sincere. You guys.
No,
are
I know.
Yeah.
I know you can mean it and also be wise about it at the same time. So you and I go way back, Gene, and you and I can speak candidly with each other. So really happy to have you on. So let's shift gears a little bit to like healthcare stuff that's in the news right now. Everybody's been following the last 6 or 8 weeks, all the debate about the federal, big, beautiful bill or the Reconciliation Act or whatever it's going to be styled as long term. That whole debate in Congress, ultimately the bill gets passed, signed into law. MedChi was an active player raising concerns about some of the things that the bill would do, I guess specifically to the Medicaid program, which is really a partnership between the federal government and state governments. I'm hoping you can give our listeners, who are all people who are interested in policy and politics, like give us the 101 level here. Now that we've seen the bill, what do we think is going to happen in health delivery?
Well, let me start off by saying this. So we were strongly opposed to the bill. And in fact, the American Medical Association was not as quick to react as we were. And we worked with the California Medical Association to form a coalition, which actually all 50 states and the District of Columbia signed on to oppose the bill very early on. And I guess the biggest concern we had by far was the cuts to Medicaid were going to really hurt people of limited means. And I will say this, the AMA did come on and oppose it as well at the end. There's some other technical problems with the legislation as well, but it just that was our big concern, was what it would do for people with limited means. With regards to what actually happened and what passed, and I think this is where your listeners are going to be most interested. I will say objectively, even though I didn't like it, it could have been a lot worse. A lot of the pain and the cuts to the states was pushed to future years. We do have a little bit of a cliff that's going to occur in 27 and 28. So I think the first thing that your local government members will be interested or worried about will be the fact that there will be cuts to the state, which will put pressure on the budget, which is already pressured, as I'm sure you're very, very well aware. So just some of the bigger issues in the final passed bill. HR 1 eliminates coverage for people with documentation challenges starting October 1 of next year. So the Maryland had fully expanded and allowed for non-citizens to be on Medicaid. That will no longer be the case as of October of next year, 26. Work requirements were in the legislation, and the work requirements will take effect on December 31st of next year. This establishes that adults between 19 and 65 are supposed to be working 80 hours a month. This is going to cause the state to have to spend tens of millions of dollars to implement and administer. Right now, Medicaid can be applied retroactively up to 3 months. Starting in December of 26, you can't do that. From a practical point of view for your listeners, that means if somebody goes in and they're eligible for Medicaid, but they haven't signed up, and they go into an emergency room or a doctor's office, you can get them signed up, and that service will be covered backwards for 3 months, starting the 31st of December and 26. It's only going to be 1 month. Then starting in 27, they're going to make us check to every 6 months to make sure that people are renewed. So those are some of the big changes. The net result of that is a lot of people are going to come off of the rolls and are not going to be eligible, and it's going to increase a lot of uncompensated care, and it's going to reduce the Medicaid match to the state government and put pressure on the budget.
Okay, so let me see if I can help connect a couple of dots for our random listener who may not have caught a couple terms there you used. So if we end up with people who are currently covered under Medicaid, they passed the means test or whatever, and they're covered under Medicaid in Maryland today, that's effectively health insurance that can cover their basic care, a pretty wide range of different care and so forth. If they lose that coverage, whether it's because they can't satisfy the work requirement, or I think from some experiments in the work requirement in other states, like in Arkansas, we find that some people just kind of get lost in a paper shuffle, that administratively you end up with some people who sort of just get lost, not because they won't work or can't work, but they can't figure out the paperwork maze that sometimes gets created. Or if it's people without documentation as citizens, okay, you end up with a wave of people who still will need health care, but don't have a health insurance coverage that will let them go get preventative care or routine care for their family members or whatnot. Then you end up with these people getting, coming to the hospital, coming to the emergency room, where we will take them and serve them, but they'll end up being used the term uncompensated care. Basically, that's healthcare providers just have to build that into what they charge those of us who are paying through insurance or maybe personally. We all just pay more because some people don't have coverage. Is that a fair sort of like reset on all that stuff?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. Essentially, the list of things that take effect between 26 and 28 that I just rattled through are all designed to reduce the number of people who have access to coverage, and they're designed to put pressure on the state with regards to pulling match money from the federal government back. So that is exactly what will happen. You'll have a reduction in the number of people who have Medicaid, and when they don't have Medicaid, it doesn't mean they don't get care. And in fact, to your point of going to the emergency room, not only will the hospital or the ER doctor or the physician see it, they're actually required to because of something called EMTALA. The other issue for the county governments that you represent is it's going to put a lot more pressure on the emergency services and EMTs, because people aren't going to get preventative care and care they need, and they're going to end up in an emergency, and you're going to see an increase in the number of EMT calls. So we're going to pay for it. We're just going to pay for it with higher insurance rates and more burden on county emergency services.
So kind of going off of that, some of the stuff that I've read, I keep hearing things about rural hospitals and healthcare there being a real worry. Can you explain why some people are so worried that their rural hospital might shut down and that some people might be left without local care?
So we're a little different, and maybe we can talk about this issue next, but we have something called a Medicare waiver that really protects our rural hospitals and is very, very helpful for them specifically. But across the country, you'll find that many of the rural hospitals have a very high percentage of Medicaid patients, and they're running very tight budgets. And that's similar here as well, too. But for other reasons, a different item is going to put pressure on them. But in other states, rural hospitals have been closing. You see them, not being able to make it work. Essentially, by cutting the number of people who have Medicaid, you're going to reduce the funds to those hospitals. And because their margins are tighter and they're smaller, it's going to put more pressure on healthcare. So it's definitely an issue for rurals across this country, no question about it.
Right, and something that we may be taking for granted because of how close care is to so many of us. But of course, there are areas of Maryland where that nearest hospital already is a drive, and losing that access could be devastating.
Right, and the other big issue too is the fact that we do also have another federal program that's being discussed at length right now with the administration federally and the administration here in the state that is really helping those rural hospitals out. So that's another kind of looming issue that we need to deal with regards to healthcare.
So Maryland's, I mean, we're sort of one of a kind, right? With our all-payer system and having the HSCRC, a state panel that basically sets rates for lots of standard healthcare offerings, right? Like you get a certain type of an MRI, and in Maryland, there's sort of a schedule that everybody charges for the MRI. You do the same kind of service in Georgia, and it's like the Wild West. One place will charge this much, another place will charge something totally different. We're really unusual, and I think we're one of a kind, absolutely unique. Is that right?
We are absolutely one of a kind. And interestingly, that rate setting system has somewhat morphed over time. We first got this ability to set rates and have our own payment model for hospitals back in 1977, before you or I were active in either of our organizations. And we've had it ever since. More recently, the hospitals have been put on global budgets, but we're able to do that because of a unique Medicare waiver. This is unrelated to HR 1. Now, HR 1, I won't call it the term that Donald Trump calls it, because I don't think there's anything beautiful about throwing people off Medicaid personally. But the HR 1 issue puts pressure on our whole system. And like I said, most of the stuff was delayed to the out years after the midterm election for some reason, oddly, Michael. I don't know why that would be, but a lot of the more controversial, difficult stuff doesn't happen until after November of 26. So the Medicare waiver is currently in discussion, which is that unique rate setting model that we have with the federal government.
So when you say that's under discussion, let's double click there, because if that provision that Maryland's unique waiver lets us have this structure that might be sort of defending our rural healthcare infrastructure from the pressure that other states are going to see. If that's under discussion, and maybe we don't have as secure of a future with the model we've got today, this could be a confluence of two tricky things happening at once, and the mess could be worse if we lose our waiver. Is that fair?
That is very fair. And I think, and I will say this, that I think this is something that the administration, that Governor Moore and Secretary Shami have been very, very focused on protecting. They've been, both of them have had regular meetings with the key stakeholders and have been very focused on trying to figure out how to make it work out. And there are negotiations going on right now. Just so everybody kind of understands how it works or what it is, we essentially have this unique model which results in the funds coming in for the state to control and distribute them on the hospitals. It also gives us authority to run some other programs which are beneficial to population health, and it allows us to pay for things like graduate education and capital improvements to the hospitals. So it's a really important program. Right now, Governor Moore, prior to the November election, when Donald Trump was elected, signed an agreement to have the waiver continue and to go into a program called AHEAD. And the federal government and the state are negotiating what AHEAD will look like. The big change that the federal government has said will happen, and we're going to have to make this adjustment, is the rate setting authority is going to move from the state to the federal government. They've said they want that. And the state has said, well, as long as the funding maintains the same and we can work through the issues, we can try to work with you. So right now, there are negotiations going back and forth between the state and the federal government to try to keep the model in a way that will work for us. But if for some reason that were to change significantly or go away, or the money that came through that, it would put incredible pressure on the entire healthcare system and the hospitals. Some of the hospitals in rural areas in Maryland are open because of the way that we have the ability to move money to the rural areas and help them out. And underserved areas are able to be kind of stood up because we're managing the market in a smoother way.
So why is this so unique to Maryland, and or any other states? Have they thought about doing a model like this, or is Maryland's just too different or difficult to replicate? Can you touch on that?
Yeah, so not to get too much into history, but as I mentioned earlier, this was started back in 1977. In the late 70s, rate setting was all the rage because there was a desire to kind of control costs. And multiple states were on rate setting, actually, and had it. And they also tried to do hospital rate setting. The issue is, one of the deals is, if you're going to have this agreement to have this special flow of money from the federal government, you have to agree to control cost. And interestingly, the state of Maryland has been able to meet the cost requirements and quality measures for all this time. The last state prior to us to have any kind of rate setting was New Jersey, and they lost it quite some time ago. I mean, we're talking over 30 or 40 years ago. It's been forever. I want to say the late 80s, early 90s. So it's just one of those things where we've been able to kind of adapt and stay with it. And the hospitals have been very committed. We have some uniqueness here because every hospital in Maryland happens to be a nonprofit. there just tends to be this relationship where we've been able to manage through it. And over time, it's changed. I mean, originally it was exactly how Michael described it, where everything was set by rate and they paid by rate. Now they've shifted to more of a global budget model, but we've always been able to work through those issues with the federal government and go from there. And look, we did sign an agreement with the federal government. The new administration is working with us. They want to work with the state. The state is trying to work with them. So I'm cautiously optimistic that cool heads are going to prevail and we're going to work through it and we're going to keep something in place. But if I was a county commissioner right now, like I was, 15 years ago, I would be really watching this, because if something were to change and we were to go to a national type model, a significant amount of money would be pulled out of Maryland, specifically on the Medicare side, and there'd be a lot of pressure and some hospitals would have to close. It could really cause the counties to be in a problem where the health department would be pressured to provide additional services. And as you know, Michael, and your members know, the health departments in Maryland are jointly run by the county and the state, and a lot of those expenses do fall on the counties. And it would just put incredible pressure on the counties to deal with these types of services through emergency services, through the county health departments. So between the cuts that have been approved and the changes that are coming to the Medicaid budget, and the fact that we're in a little bit of flux and negotiating the unique rate setting system, it's really important, I think, for the local electeds to talk to their health officers, make sure they're paying attention, understanding what programs are at risk, and how are they going to treat patients as things change.
I think that's really well said. I appreciate you sort of like connecting back to, if you're a community leader, what you should be watching for and continuing to follow. So that's really helpful. I want to try and do the same thing with one more thing you mentioned earlier. And I want to make sure that I picked up on it correctly and that our listeners did as well. You had talked about when the feds are looking to scale back Medicaid, and they have this target to come up with $1 trillion and so forth over their 10-year scoreboard. So that's a pretty big number. And for the most part, that they're doing this by having fewer people be eligible through one means or another. Now, it seemed you had made a mention that this can end up being a squeeze on the state budget. And you mentioned administrative costs, but I think there's another piece that I want to be sure that I've got this right. So sort of fact check when I say this. In the event that a state like Maryland sits down and says, we are afraid we're going to have whatever tens of thousands of people newly removed from the Medicaid rolls and probably without the means to provide their own health insurance coverage, adequate coverage for themselves, for their families, and so forth, then there's a pressure on state level leaders to say, these are folks who we've been helping in the past, and we see a public interest with as many households, as many families as possible having regular health care so that they can get their routine care rather than relying on emergency room visits and that uncompensated care path. It's in our interest to have those folks covered. So that would be pressure to say, let's backfill these federal cuts with something we can do at the state level. And that would be a new, potentially really big pressure on a state budget that's already like facing great pressure. We already just went through a $3 billion crisis management this last legislative session. So is that about right, that there's a new element here that Maryland might feel an obligation to help people who are living here remain covered, and that's going to be a costly enterprise?
That is absolutely correct. And actually, there's even another problem as well.
All right,
but
hit it.
to the point that you just made, that is, for example, I explained how the people who have documentation challenges are going to be coming off the rolls rather quickly. I think you'll see legislation next year from somebody suggesting that we figure out how to provide something for them, and that's going to be a problem. And also, we're talking about the healthcare cuts, but remember, the bill also has cuts to student loans, SNAP, and actually other healthcare cuts too, because it also makes changes to the insurance exchange, which I think they're still trying to work out, but there might be cuts there too. So I think you're going to definitely see legislation to backfill and provide those services, particularly in a state like Maryland. But there's another problem. When some of these more complicated rules come into effect and it reduces the number of people who are eligible, we get a lot of matches in Medicaid. So a lot of services in Medicaid are matched either at the 50% rate or at another rate, other rates. For example, technology is at 75. If you reduce the number of people on the rolls, you reduce the federal matches for those services. And you might say, well, you're not providing the service anymore, but the government obviously is using that money in different ways and providing for it to provide services. So it's going to put incredible pressure on the Medicaid department and on the health department and therefore the state. So I definitely think that this is like there's really three kind of threats here. We have the hidden tax of they're still going to go to the emergency room and our insurance rates are going to go up. We have the reality that we do care about people and we're going to want to go and backfill SNAP programs and coverage for undocumented and coverage for people who can't meet the work requirement or whatever. And then the third thing is that we will clearly lose match money the way this bill passed, and particularly in the 27 and 28 budget years, that's going to put a lot of pressure on Guy Gazzone and Vanessa Atterbury and Ben Barnes to figure out how they're going to balance that budget, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on everybody.
All right, so we got all three legs of the stool, translating to pressure here in Maryland. I'm sure in other states as well will feel it in their own different ways, but this is a new element in what was already a challenging fiscal situation. I mean, obviously, this is substantially about people and their ability to get care for their household, and their family. But there's also a fiscal consequence here, and it's multi-tiered, and there's some risk to Maryland at the state level and potentially at the local level. I'm with you, forecasting that this could end up being a squeeze on our local health departments who provide usually a complementary part of a healthcare service level, but for folks who are without a primary physician because they don't have insurance coverage, they end up in clinics more, they end up in emergency rooms more, and we just end up with the sort of second choice options that really aren't best for preventative care and so forth. So, all right,
and don't underestimate those poor emergency service guys, because if some group of people are not getting care, it results in more calls to the 911 centers, which are run by the counties, which results in more runs by the ambulance companies, and all that is cost that is usually borne almost solely by the counties.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
but it'll be all right. I mean, honestly, though,
yeah.
I will say this
Okay.
just to make you guys feel better. It could have been a lot worse. A lot of the cuts were delayed, and there were suggestions of making even more direct cuts, which would have put even more pressure on us. And I will say this, that I am cautiously optimistic that we're going to try to figure out. I believe the health secretary is acting very responsibly and working as closely as they can with an administration where there's not a lot of alignment on their views. But I think the parties are working together to try to keep the Medicare waiver. And if we manage to do that, we're doing a lot of unique and interesting things. So I think the key is we got to stay positive and keep working through the issues. And I just would really urge the counties, the different jurisdictions to talk to their health officer, make sure somebody on the council or commission has some understanding of what's going on and what the risk is. So if there is a major change or a major problem, they're prepared for it and they're not getting hit all of a sudden in a budget cycle in 2027.
Well, that's really well said.
Anything else you'd like to add, or stuff that we didn't get to? Any other things you wanted to hit at?
No, I just wanted to, again, I know Michael gave me stuff for Pitch and Mako, but I thought Mako was a great organization. I'm still a Queen Anne's County resident, and I actually have served on the liquor board there. I'm the chair of the liquor board in Queen Anne's County as a citizen public servant in a way as well. So I still stay involved in local government. I really think it's important for people to be involved in local government because it is where things actually get done and happen. You're really helping people at the level where they can come to your house and knock on the door and tell you about the pothole or the traffic sign that needs to be fixed or whatever. And I feel like it's a great place to do some public service and help people out. So I wanted to give a pitch for Mako, and I wanted to give a pitch for public service at the local level.
Well,
A+.
thank you. Yeah, seriously. And thanks for taking the time to chat with us and our listeners. We do really appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys.
And just a quick reminder for all of our listeners, our summer conference is coming up on August 13th through the 16th in Ocean City. Our theme is Funding the Future, the Evolving Role of Local Government. There's going to be some really good content, including a panel on Medicaid, so we hope to see you there. All right, well, that is it for us. If you enjoy hearing about local politics and policy, be sure to subscribe to the Conduit Street Podcast from whatever device and service platform you choose. On behalf of Gene Ransom and Michael Sanderson, this is Karrington Anderson. Goodbye, and we will talk to you soon.